See that lone pine up on that hill over there? What are we actually doing right now? The kids are just wild out there. They're wild. But they're having a good time, you know? They're having a good time. This is Untamed Unbroken, the Adventurer's Guide, and I'm your host, Blake Bredesen. How are things up in the Boundary Waters? How are things in Ely this year?
You know, things have been good, and they've been wet. We have been in a cycle of rain, and more rain, which is pretty stunning because we had a dry, droughty winter with almost no snow, virtually no snow, and then spring came along and summer canoe trips started, and we've just been in a cycle of rain. We got so much rain, so the lakes are full.
Yeah,
the canoes are floating high.
Yeah, I've heard some of the effects that has had on entry points, portages. What have you been hearing on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was some drama for sure with particularly high water, but a lot of these watersheds that we had the biggest issues with, they're kind of small watersheds and they kind of jump up. The water raises really quickly if you get like a deluge of 5 inches in it. But then that same watershed, well, it peaks, but it peaks for a short period of time, and then the water starts coming down. Moose River North was one of those entry points that had some pretty dramatic flooding happening that lasted for a few days, and then it became, more manageable, like high water, kind of a typical high water situation. So, but we also had, speaking of all the rain, we had roads washed out and some road closures and some pretty unique weather related stuff related to the rain. And so always something.
What was that one up on? Yeah, it keeps you on your toes for sure. What was that one up on Mud Row?
Yeah, that was kind of spectacular. Yeah, that was kind of spectacular. So the issue with the Mudrow Lake entry point is there's one road that accesses that entry point parking lot, and it's a little old logging road, gravel, and it got totally flooded and totally washed out. So you couldn't get through it even with like a 4-wheel drive. And so there were a couple of dozen vehicles that were sort of stranded there. Like literally you couldn't drive out. So that was a surprise for folks when they got back and got the news. That's the first time I know of that happening in 30 years. I mean, it's so extraordinary. Fortunately, it was an inconvenience for folks for sure, but it was something that was kind of manageable because they had cell service there at the parking lot, and so there's good communication. To talk to people about what's going on, what the status is. They can tell their families back home, "Hey, don't worry, we're fine. We just can't drive back to town because the road's washed out." But they did a pretty tremendous job. It just took them a couple of days to get that road to the point that they could drive those vehicles out. But still, some folks were staying a couple extra days longer than they planned to. So eventful for them for sure.
Yeah. That's a fun phone call too, to be like, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to work. I have a couple extra days here."
There's no way out. Choice. You could paddle out. You could still paddle and portage around that washed out road.
Okay.
But you wouldn't have your vehicle. There's no way they're getting your vehicle out.
Right. No, that's good. Is there any other issues as of now? Because that was a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, we still keep having rain, so we still have high water related issues.
Okay.
It's not as extraordinary as it was after we got this deluge. Places got up to 8 inches of rain or so in the area, and there were tremendous amounts of rain over a very large area. Like most of the BWCA in one storm got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or even 8 inches of rain in a very short period of time. And it's the high water levels related to that kind of come down now.
Okay.
But they're still more like springtime high water. And so travelers have issues with some of those portages that are kind of close to the rapids, and that the current could be a little grabby, right? So you just got to be extra careful as you're approaching any rapids or any swift water, just make sure you don't overshoot that portage and that you're just being extra careful.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Was there any injuries with those storms coming throughout the month of June?
Yeah, it is interesting. So we haven't had, issues, wind issues and issues of trees falling and injuring people are something that I think a lot about. But fortunately, I mean, there was one issue on one of these storms over on the Gunflint side.
Okay.
It's a young person dealing with again, a kind of a falling tree, and that's one that
Yeah.
was related to this for sure.
Was
Yeah.
that the 9-year-old boy with their
Mm-hmm.
family? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I did
Yeah.
hear about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that landed. I don't know how big the tree is. Did you ever hear how big that tree was?
No, no, I didn't. I
Okay.
mean, we were a little bit out of the loop on that one because I was on the far east end off the Gunflint Trail,
Yeah.
and we're based around the Ely area. Yeah.
Okay. I had heard, so I had read, I don't know if it was a friend of the family that was interviewed on that one, but he did get or was expected to get released from the hospital down in the cities. I don't remember which hospital, but with that tree like landing on his head, he had some brain swelling and stuff that
Yeah. Yeah.
he made like a way quicker, I think, recovery than they were anticipating.
Yeah. I've just heard kind of real secondhand information that
Yeah.
he was recovering well,
Yep.
but that's just kind of
That's all you know.
secondhand
Yep.
info. So fortunately, it's just these big storms. Sometimes we just have a whole lot of wind with them, and we have had some wind for sure, but a lot of them have just been just deluges where the sky just comes, directly down just like a river without dramatic winds.
Okay.
Fortunately.
So yeah, not a ton of wind, just a ton of rain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That keeps you on your toes, keeps things interesting for people. Hopefully they brought
Yeah.
their rain gear.
Oh my gosh, right. Yeah. I always encourage people day after
No
day,
matter what.
bring your rain gear, bring your, reliably waterproof tops and bottoms for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Now at least it's warm enough out that it's not as big of a, safety issue with
Yep.
hypothermia, but when the,
Right.
the temperatures are cooler, and we can even get cooler temperatures in July, right? Uh,
Hmm.
right now we're finally getting a sort of a bit of a heat wave uh, for the first time this summer, so we don't think about that quite as much. But always good to have reliably waterproof rain gear tops and bottoms.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember having
Mm-hmm.
a conversation with somebody recently that their first trip to the Boundary Waters about 11 years ago, they didn't have rain gear. And
Every trip you
no one
learn
told
something.
them.
E- e- Every trip you learn something, and we have a good checklist around the shop, and so we
Yeah.
we we ask everybody if they have rain gear, and we're like, well, we recommend that everybody has reliably waterproof rain gear tops and bottoms, and we sell last minute stuff in the shop if you need it.
Yeah. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess related to Ely Outfitting Company, what's the let's back up a little bit. What's the
Yeah,
backstory there? What led up to Ely Outfitting Company that it is today?
sure. So I started it from scratch about 20 years ago,
All
and
right.
it was just me and one cedar strip wooden canoe that I built in the garage, and I just started guiding full time. And initially, it was I got my start 20 years ago guiding dog sledding trips in the
Okay.
winter, and I became completely and totally enamored by dog sledding for about a decade.
Okay.
And for dog sledding, you need snow, and snow melts in the spring, and so I had to figure out something to do in the summertime.
Yeah.
And I had done a little guiding way back in the day in the summer of '97, right after college. And I thought, well, I have those skills, and that sounds kind of interesting. So I kind of rebooted that for the summer months while I was waiting for the snow to come back and do more dog sledding.
Okay. Nice. And how has the company then? How has it changed since those first days when it was just you in a canoe?
Right. So it's changed a lot. It was really just me and a canoe to start, and then there was more work than I could handle, and started hiring other guides who could take people in the woods. And then some of those clients wanted to come back and do self-guided trips, and so we started doing canoe rentals and camping equipment rentals for self-guided trips. And then that just kept snowballing until we became this full service outfitter
Yeah.
in downtown Ely. And now we've got kind of everything you can need, all lightweight canoes, specialized camping equipment, your trail menu, professional guide if you want to take a professional guide along. Most people decide to go self-guided because it's such a user-friendly wilderness that way. It's one of
Yeah.
the things that makes the Boundary Water special. And so now we've got a lot more canoes than that one cedar strip canoe. The cedar strip canoe has largely been retired. It's hanging up above the check-in desk,
Okay,
and
nice.
now we got 100 some canoes floating around the shop to get people in the woods with. And people really like. I really like the lightweight
Yeah.
Kevlar style canoes for
Yeah, I
sure
do.
these
I do
days.
too. I
Yeah,
do
they're a
too.
dream. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was actually my wife's first trip. I think I told you prior when we met at the rendezvous. Um, my wife's first trip, we just went into South Hegman. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, let's go
Lovely
easy,
spot.
easy trip." But we rented a canoe from you guys. So I was like, I didn't have anything at the time. So, and I didn't want to bring my dad's old aluminum canoe, even though it was just
Keep
one portage.
keep it easy and keep it fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it easy and keep it fun.
I was
Mm-hmm.
surprised to see when we were there too that we had like 2 bars of cell service when we
That's
were on the lake.
changing. Every year it's changing, and it's pretty incredible to see how cell service is expanding into the wilderness.
Yeah.
And now there's some talk about having like cell phone satellite texting here throughout the wilderness in the next year or so. So
Oh, really? Is that
communications really changing.
yeah? Is that specific to the Boundary Waters that you're hearing?
It's specific to certain areas. How it's all going to work isn't really clear, but it has to do with Starlink satellites and the ability to text from certain new smartphones,
Okay.
and using these special Starlink satellites. And it
Oh,
hasn't been rolled out yet, so we don't know really what it's going to look
yeah.
like. But it sounds like it's happening, and they're only going to do it in certain areas, is what I've heard. Although, like I said,
Okay.
details are still being worked out. But
Yeah.
it sounds like it's going to include the Boundary Waters, which changes things when you
Yeah.
have really predictable communication options in the wilderness. It's comforting, but a lot of people are concerned that it gives sort of this false sense of security, because the wilderness is a big place, and if something goes wrong, you really have to be prepared to do your best to help yourself out of that situation without
Yeah.
expecting
Exactly.
help to come in from somewhere outside of the wilderness, or something to
Right.
somebody else to swoop in and
Right.
provide assistance right away.
Right. Because yeah, it's not like calling the cops or calling getting the fire department out there.
Yeah, they don't
It's
just
an
drive to
hour.
your house.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't
it's
just
hours.
drive to your house and pick you up and
Yeah.
provide that assistance, get your cat out of the tree or whatever. It's a lot more involved in the
Yeah.
wilderness for sure.
What do you try? Do you guys have any advice for people as far as contingencies or planning for emergencies? Or do you tell if you have some beginners that are coming in and using you as an outfitting service, what are you telling them?
Sure. So we spend a lot of time with folks. We talk over a lot of safety issues. It's always good to be prepared, know what you're getting into, have good planning. At the shop, though, we'll talk over a safety checklist
Mhm.
of a lot of different things to think about. The most dangerous thing in the woods, we say, is yourself,
Yeah.
because it's poor judgment.
Yep.
So we find that usually when people get injured or in a kind of a bad situation in the woods, once they kind of have a chance to look back at that situation and think about it, they said, "Hey, if I was being more careful, that probably wouldn't have happened."
Right. Yeah. that false sense of security is a big one, because I feel like a lot of people will just go into the situation being like, well, I can just text somebody if I need help, and not have any plans to help themselves, even though help's 5-6 hours away at the
Mm-hmm.
earliest.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's
Yeah,
going to
it
be.
is. It is a different place. I mean, it's that's one of the really great things about the wilderness too, is that you're that disconnected.
Yep.
But it is important to just appreciate that you are that disconnected.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Only recently have I, gosh, a few years ago, bought one of those Zoleo devices,
Yeah,
and
those are sweet.
they are very nice. And it was
Yeah,
more so peace of mind for my wife than anything. But then as I've had it, and I'm
absolutely.
like, this makes too much sense. Like
Yeah.
you hear too many stories. It's like, yes, you don't want to hit that SOS button. Like, you want to do everything you can to get yourself out of the situation if you're able to. But at certain times, case in point, this year, there's been some crazy stuff that has happened early in the Boundary Waters and other wilderness areas too, not just the Boundary Waters, but where it's like, yeah, having some sort of device like that can be a big a big impact.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one of our guides has one of those, and so I'm kind of regularly texting back and forth. It's just kind of handy to know how things are
Yeah.
going and
Yep.
if they're having any issues. So yeah, we
Yeah.
use the Garmin InReach as well. That's
Yep.
another nice one to have.
Yep. Yeah, there's a few of them out there. I don't think they're
Hmm.
going to go anywhere, at least not right away. With there's like that whole discussion where, all right, so iPhones have this SOS capability now, the newer iPhones, and it's going to be coming, like Androids are going to be soon. And then that's going to evolve where you can just text, basically. I don't know if it has something, if it's linked with the Starlight stuff that you were talking about, but you'll have that. But I just feel like the more robust option, because then you're still relying on your phone. It's, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a few years before those devices are obsolete.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are a lot of them out there too, right?
Yep, exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So when someone comes to you for some outfitting service, like, what's the timeline like for you guys? What's typical? When should somebody approach you?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with permit availability these days, and there's been a dramatic change in permit availability
Mhm.
just in the last 4 years. And
Yep.
permits for summer Boundary Waters camping trips become available the last Wednesday in January for the following summer. And so it's just become pretty important if you're able to start planning, well before the last week of January of the year you're going to do your Boundary Waters trip.
Yeah.
Because if you are able to plan ahead and reserve that permit on the last Wednesday in January, then you're much more likely to get your first choice for entry point and entry date.
Right.
So the longer you wait, the more flexibility you might need to have on your entry permit.
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting just to see how much it's changed in the last 4 years, because you used to be able to wait until the spring, and people thought, well, if I can't get the permit I really want, then there'll be plenty others to choose from, and I'll maybe go to some place I wouldn't have otherwise gone to, but it might be a fun opportunity for discovery that I wouldn't have otherwise had. Now I think people are fearing that if they wait, it's not that they're just going to go to a different entry point, but that there just aren't going to be any permits left for any entry points. And I think that's the sort of fear that's
Okay.
that's driving the demand for permits now.
Okay.
So yeah, start planning in the winter. It's a great time. You got
It's a
long nights in January.
Yeah, it's a perfect time to be planning a trip. Exactly.
Yeah, and we have a pretty unique trip planning process. So
Yeah.
folks will go on our website and they'll fill out a trip routing form, and that just lets them sort of click through their interests and expectations and their sort of experience levels.
Okay.
And then we email back some more information and route options with interactive maps and details. So it's just a good way to to get a sense of some good options and narrow down like a ton of options to a few that kind of fit with what you're looking for.
Okay.
And it's nice because if you're, trip planning with other folks in your group, your spouse or friend or whatever, you can share that interactive map and those details with them to get your head around it as well.
Okay, nice. And that's right on your website?
It's right on the website. Yeah, it's at the top of every page.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be using it. First,
Yeah, it's a fun tool. We actually look at all of them. None of them are just computer generated, but we're actually taking lots and lots of options and distilling them down to ones that work with what you're looking for.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
So on the back end, you're looking through a form that someone submitted and are looking
Exactly.
and being like, all right, these 5 entry points kind of fit the bill for what you're looking for.
Yep, exactly. And these are the routes that you could do out of those entry points.
Okay.
And that's what we do. We do try to narrow it down to 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 routes if it looks like you've got a lot of different options that
Okay.
would fit your interests.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
It's one of the great things about the Boundary Waters is just that it has so many options.
Yeah.
Young put on the miles and move every day and have a grand adventure that's traveling just really long distances and seeing a ton, to folks who are like, I just need to unplug and relax and sit in the hammock and enjoy the wilderness and maybe base camp or just have maybe 2 campsites. It has really wonderful options for both, which is unusual for wilderness.
Yeah.
As you look at wilderness areas around the country, most are not nearly as accessible as the Boundary Waters. Right. And they're not as accessible in large part because you have to be able to hike in, and you have to have a child that's old enough to follow on foot and keep up with you, or you're going to be carrying them in a pack. But I don't know how that works if you're backpacking. You have to have all your other gear on your back.
Right.
But in the Boundary Waters, you throw your kids in the canoe, and the canoe does a lot of the work. You paddle across the lake, pop them out on the portage, and they get to run off a little steam across the portage.
Exactly.
And then you hop back in the canoe, and the geography of the Boundary Waters is significant also because it's sort of long and narrow. So the entry points are really spread out, all around the fringe. So to get a wilderness experience, you can go in a relatively short distance, just across the line and go in a little ways and still have a good wilderness experience without having to put on a ton of miles.
Yeah, exactly. I've gone on trips where, like I said, South Hagman.
Yeah.
And, that was all, she needed. It's all we needed for that first trip for her. And it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And,
set yourself up for success with the first trip, right?
Yeah.
Leave people wanting more.
Exactly.
And, I'm always amazed at how you paddle across that imaginary line that is the wilderness boundary. And once you're in, like, all those cares back home really start to melt away.
Yep.
You're not going to see, any development. You're not going to see motorboats or jet skis. It's your mind just goes to a different place. Yeah. And it's a special thing.
For sure it is. For sure. What would you say if somebody was wanting to go in the fall and mix in a little duck hunting or grouse hunting along with some fishing? Do you have is there any routes or entry points that come to mind right off the top of your head for that?
It's interesting. The grouse hunting, the woods are pretty thick once you're off of trail.
They are
off the trail. Yes. And so it's, your ability to kind of efficiently move through the woods for grouse hunting is pretty challenging if you're not on the trails. But there are some hiking trails, like the Sioux Hustler Trail is one that sometimes people are walking for grouse or walking, portage trails and things like that. But there are a lot of grouse out there. Our duck flyway, it seems like it's definitely shifting right maybe to the west or so. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there are certain parts of the boundary waters that have more duck hunting, and I think of the areas over by Isabella that have more duck hunting.
Okay.
We don't tend to work with those folks. We closed down on October 6th this year,
Okay,
and
got it.
so we don't talk much with duck hunters who are hitting the trail
Yeah.
in the boundary waters.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there are, like, I've done a duck hunting / fish trip one time before, and it was super fun. It was like second week of October.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of went up Nina Moose, Nina Moose into Agnes, American
Mm-hmm.
Agnes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a nice spot. But
Yeah.
not a lot. I mean, weren't like hitting it hard duck hunting. It was mostly a fishing trip,
Right.
but
Mm-hmm.
had some success with the ducks there.
Good.
So yeah, I just was curious if you've known anybody that will actually go into the wilderness and either even bow hunt or do anything like that. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
um,
there's definitely some of that going on. I think,
okay,
a lot of the people I know, we don't do it business wise, just because we close before the deer hunting season is up and running. And most of the people I know, it's more they're going for convenience outside the wilderness.
yeah,
But some people are definitely going deeper in because they want the challenge of that wilderness experience, and they want that solitude. And man, you go out there in October, or say the beginning of November, and you have a lot of solitude. There are not many people out there, but for good reason, because it's cold, and there have been plenty of deer seasons for folks who are paddling in the wilderness, and it's a little touch and go about the potential of getting iced in,
yeah,
like
for
ice
sure.
forming on the lakes, and not being able to paddle out. Definitely sort of playing through on the issue, as well as people are thinking about really late season. And
Yeah,
you do just need to make sure your skills are in line with a wilderness canoeing and camping trip if you're going you know in October and November, because there are pretty significant risks related to cold water immersion and
yes,
hypothermia.
for sure.
Expect it to snow on you the second week, starting October. Expect it to snow overnight and then maybe melt during the day, and yeah, be prepared for the real weather
Yeah,
and kind of special concerns of cold weather late season
right,
tripping.
right. Yeah, know what to do if you do get dipped into that water
Yeah,
on
well,
accident.
and make absolutely certain you don't.
Yeah,
That's your best
true. Yeah, do
advice.
everything you can to do.
Yeah,
Not for sure.
yeah. Don't take any
Um,
risks.
we had lucky weather when we were there. It was
It's
50 to
so amazing. So
55, and it did, the cold low temps were 30, 32,
oh, I love it. I love these cold
but it's
these
perfect.
cold nights. You wake up. It's good coffee drinking weather in the
Oh yeah,
morning,
exactly.
and then it warms up during the day.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, so you get to October, you could have the very best weather of the entire year. You could have the very worst weather of the entire year if
Yeah.
you go the
Yeah.
beginning of October, for sure. It could
Yeah.
it could it could, fall either way.
Right. That's why
Mhm.
I always leave those first couple weekends open. I'm like, if I'm gonna go,
You have to watch the weather. You
yeah,
do.
exactly.
And
It's
you
like,
can. That's one of the great things about living local, is that you can watch that in October and you're like, oh my, this is like clear skies, you know, sun and warmth. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is the time to head out.
yeah,
Hmm.
for sure, for sure. Do you get out? Do you do much of the guiding part anymore yourself?
I do some, but mostly I'm managing other guides who are getting out on trail.
Got it.
And
Got it.
it's, the guiding part of the business is something that's pretty close to my heart. I think a guide really adds a lot of value for people.
Yeah.
They get to, ramp up their skills. They'll see things that they'd otherwise miss. They will probably catch more fish,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of set themselves up for maybe coming back and going self-guided, and
Right.
just help. A guide just helps with the day-to-day decision making,
Yeah.
and it's a special thing to go professionally guided.
Is there anything that the guy, like your guides that you have taken people out, is there anything special that they have to do to become a guide, or is it just
Yeah,
learning on the go, on the job training type of thing?
sure. So in order to guide in the wilderness, you have to have a special use permit with the U.S. Forest Service,
Okay.
and then all the guides are individually licensed with the Forest Service, and so they carry guide cards on them when they're in the wilderness. And there are different ways that guides kind of cut their teeth and kind of get into the business. I feel like a lot of them get their start the same way I did, which is in youth programs. So
Okay.
you guide young people in the wilderness.
Yep.
So I got my start in the summer of '97, guiding primarily high school youth groups in the wilderness. I figured, like, if you can guide high school kids in the wilderness, you can do just about anything in life in the world. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah. If you can
it's one of the
handle that.
toughest things you'll ever do. Pretty amazing. But that's how I think a lot of people get started on guiding, and
Okay.
then they move from there, typically the nonprofit sector, over to the more commercial guiding. And we have a lot of overlap between dog sledding guides in the community who
Okay.
then switch over in the summer and guide canoe trips.
Okay. Nice. When does the, I mean, obviously you need snow for dog sledding. That
Mm-hmm.
goes without saying. It helps when there's ice on the lakes too.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk me through that. That's interesting and something I didn't know about you before. So when do you still are you still into the dog sledding stuff as of now, or is that faded?
I retired from dog sledding
Okay.
guiding, but a lot of our team guides dog sled trips, and we got several really good dog sledding businesses in the community. So there's still a lot of dog sledding going on. We have just really good topography, and we tend to have reliable snow conditions and just generally good weather
Yeah.
for the dog sledding businesses. And so you can do anything from like just a quick day trip dog sledding around Ely. You can do a lodge based sort of multi day dog sledding trip. So dog sled during the day and then stay in warm, comfy cabins or lodges at night. Do that for a few days or a week. And then, another option would be to do something a little more robust and do a dog sled winter camping trip where you actually go, deeper out in the woods and you're camping typically on the lake,
Yep.
kind of looking up at the stars with the dogs and traveling that way in,
That's cool.
in the backcountry.
Yeah. Do people do that into the boundary waters then too with the dog sleds?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
you can. That's sweet.
Yeah, and there's some ice fishing going on, so that's pretty popular to get up to the trout lakes and
Yeah.
fish lakers
Yeah.
in the winter.
Okay.
So that's a good option as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hmm. Yeah, solitude. If you want solitude, do a winter trip in the
Go in the
Boundary
winter.
Waters.
Yes.
It's so quiet. It's just
Yeah, that snow
phenomenal.
has that sound
Yeah,
deadening effect that is, it's not
yeah.
matchable by anything.
Hmm. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, for sure.
And no bugs.
That's also why I like the fall too. You know, in
Oh, for sure.
October you're
Hmm.
not dealing with that, which this year I've been
Hmm.
hearing the bugs are pretty horrendous up there at times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we're having a solid bug season, that's
So
for sure. So it's a good summer for head nets.
yeah.
You know, uh, wear your long sleeves, wear your long pants, and
Yeah.
and then you're pretty fine. And bug spray, I guess. But or if you're with somebody who's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, just stand next to them. We call that diversionary
Yeah,
feeding.
exactly. Exactly. That's the same thing as like, as long as you can run faster than the person next to you, you don't have to
Something like
worry
that.
about
Something like
bears.
that. Exactly.
So prior to you mentioned 1997. Is that when your company started? Or is that when you just
That's
started the
when
youth guiding stuff?
that's when I was guiding. That was after college, and it
Okay.
was 2004 when I moved to Ely full time year round,
Okay.
and that's when I started guiding the dog sledding trips and canoe trips
Okay.
um,
Gotcha.
back in Ely in the Boundary Waters.
What was so where did you grow up? Where were you at before Ely?
Sure, I was born and raised in Iowa. I
Okay.
grew up on a family farm down there, an old time traditional farm with a little bit of everything: some cows, some pigs, some corn, some soybeans, and a whole smattering of all sorts of other critters and crops. And took a bit of a different direction and ended up doing college and grad school, and was actually practicing law in Iowa for about
Okay.
4 years, and decided to quit my job and sell my house and move to little old Ely, Minnesota,
Yeah.
because not because I had this vision of being a wilderness guide and outfitter, but I just wanted to live closer to the boundary waters. And I sort of assumed I'd probably be living in Duluth,
Okay.
because that's where there were the sort of jobs that I'd been doing
Yep.
for a while. And I was like, well, that's close enough. I'm just a couple hours away from the wilderness, and that's not a bad gig. And but I got to Ely, and I just happened to really oddly fall into this dog sledding job because well, I was working at Wintergreen Dog Sled Lodge, but I got I got the job because one of Paul and Sue's full-time full season guides had just shattered his femur on the staff training trip.
Oh,
And there I was showing up their door, introducing myself and telling them I'd sure like to be a part of what they've got going any way I can. And so they said, sure, come on back tomorrow. So I was scooping poop and doing dog chores, and pretty quickly was guiding dog sledding trips, and really loving it. I've always loved dogs, and driving dog teams and working with people in the wilderness, in the winter, with dogs is a pretty special thing.
that's awesome. Where did the interest in the boundary waters, when did that happen? Was that as a kid, or how did
Yeah.
that get?
So I did not grow up in a camping family.
Okay.
I've never known my parents to camp in a tent, nor in like an RV or anything like that.
Okay.
But I grew up near a river, it's the Wapsipinicon River in Iowa. So I grew up fishing and canoeing and boating and swimming on that Iowa river. So I just loved the outdoors from early age. I was a pheasant hunter and a deer hunter from a very early age. So I really enjoyed the outdoors, but I didn't know anybody who had been going to the boundary waters at all until I was in college and I heard of it. And then it was my sophomore year, Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, where I was at a summer job fair, and there was a fellow there interviewing for summer guide staff positions
Oh, okay, nice.
for the boundary waters. And I chatted with him, and I thought, man, that sounds like it's just about the best job in the entire world. And I couldn't do it that summer, and I couldn't do it the summer after that, and I couldn't do it the summer after that. But the summer after that, I was available.
There we
And
go.
I had kept this fella's name and phone number for those 4 years since
Nice.
I'd chatted with him. And so the beginning of January, before that summer, I gave him a call and said, you probably don't remember me, but I met you at Luther College 4 years ago, and I'd love to be a part of what you got going on any way I can. And he said, that's great. And there's a bit of a pause. And he said, but unfortunately, all of our guide staff positions are filled. And I was like, oh, bummer, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
I thought I was ahead of the game, but a little bit of a pause, and said, but a couple of our former staff are now managing another place down the trail a little ways, and I think they might be looking for guide staff. So he gave me their names and phone number, and I gave them a call when I got off the phone with him, and sort of interviewed with them. And next thing you know, I was showing up that May of 1997 for staff training. And my staff training trip to lead trips in the Boundary Waters was actually my very first trip in the Boundary Waters.
Nice.
And it's
Nice.
interesting. So the managers there, they liked it that way because their perspective was they did not need to untrain any bad habits.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had basics, outdoor skills and canoeing skills and fishing skills and water skills and things. So I had some fundamentals, but they could kind of develop my skills in the way they wanted to. So I owe a lot to them that summer. The managers were Russ and Kathleen Vitton over in Grand Marais at
Okay,
the time.
nice.
So
So
yeah,
you
pretty lucky to
started
meet
over
them.
in Grand Marais.
Yeah, I've been
Okay.
very lucky because I got started on the very east end of the Boundary Waters,
Yeah.
and so I got to know that area really well. And I was young and I was kind of dumb, and I was going out there like on my days off. And it's funny, whenever I run into Russ and Kathleen, they remind me like I'm the only one of the guys they ever had who on his days off would head straight back out in the wilderness. And I'd like I'm heading back out there. And so I put on a ton of miles, and I'd take the heaviest aluminum canoe, and I'd take the heaviest darn pack. I'd take like cast aluminum griddles, even if it was just me. It was ridiculous. I was carrying such heavy stuff, but that was part of the experience for me. I loved it. I just loved the
Yeah.
challenge
Yeah.
and being out there. And so I saw the East End, a lot of the East End doing that. And then I ended up working on the very west end of the wilderness on Lac LaCroix at a water access only resort and outfitter up there when I first moved to Ely one of those summers. And I did outfitting and things with them. And so I got to see the very, very, very west end of the wilderness. And then I really landed in Ely, which, where we're at in Ely, we can serve most of the wilderness
Yeah.
and some really, really amazing country for sure.
For sure. I've heard some people doing, because you were talking about trips where people like some people just like to go for miles and miles and
Yeah.
miles as
Yep.
long as they can. And
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some people doing 30-day trips. How do they do that? Like how
Well,
is the permit, can
well,
you
well,
be in there for
yeah.
30 days under
Well,
one permit?
two of our staff did 366 days in a row in the wilderness. Dave and Amy Freeman, when they spent a year in the wilderness, on an advocacy trip,
Okay.
talking about protecting the wilderness for future
Nice.
generations. And so they're, so whether you do a 1 night trip or a 365 night trip, you still just need, one entry permit, and
Okay.
it's crazy cheap. It's $16 per adult.
I know.
I know, isn't that nuts?
Yes.
It's like the best value out there in the outdoors. But yeah, the same price per person if you're out there for 1 night or 365 nights. The thing is that permit is only valid until you exit the wilderness. So as soon as you exit the wilderness, that permit's invalid. You need a new permit to go back in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how did they do 366 days? Like were people coming in and resupplying them with food, or are they just
They
off living
were.
off the land?
No, they were getting resupplies of food every couple of weeks or so.
Okay.
Because it was an advocacy trip, having people come in and engage with them was a really, good way to get, social media content and awareness. So there were
Yeah.
reporters coming in and, friends as well,
Yeah.
but different people who are interested in the issue of sulfide or copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters and the
Yes.
risks related to that. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And did they move around site to site? Like, did they move around a whole bunch throughout the Boundary Waters, kind of visit
Yeah,
everywhere they could?
yeah, they did. They did a lot of moving around.
All right.
Exactly. The exception would be it was in the ice in period.
Okay.
In December when it was going from open water to hard water.
Yep. Yep.
Then they, had to stay at one campsite for longer, uh, just because you couldn't really move safely.
Yep.
And then in the spring, as ice was going out, they had to do the same thing for safety reasons.
Gotcha. That's cool. And who were
Mhm.
those people again?
Dave and Amy Freeman,
Freeman.
and they wrote a book about it. It's called A Year in the Wilderness, and it's lovely. It's very
Okay.
nice.
I'm checking that out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago did they do that?
It's crazy to think that it's been, how many? Has it been 8 years or something like that?
Okay,
Maybe.
they did it
Yeah,
eight years, semi
yeah,
recently.
yeah,
What?
semi recently, yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Mm, yeah, and
Because
I was out there. I paddled out to resupply them and see them. They're a couple of my close friends and
okay,
hang out. And I rung in the new year with them
nice,
on the Moose Chain and the BWCA. We had some battery powered, Christmas lights and
nice.
stuff.
Did
So
you bring in a bag of wine?
we actually made mulled cider.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, over the fire. Yeah, just a
Mm,
little recipe that required a couple of ingredients and we had a little bit of celebration going on there.
that's
Hmm.
fun. That's fun. Anything? Any closing thoughts you want to leave with people? Anything related to the Boundary Waters? Before we get to that, where can people find your business, Ely Outfitting Company?
Yeah, you bet. So we're in downtown Ely, Minnesota. We serve most of the Boundary Waters. We've got tons of great information on our website at elyoutfittingcompany.com. And we're just happy to help folks pull together all the details for a successful Boundary Waters canoe trip. That's what we
Cool.
do.
Any social
Hmm.
channels that you're on, Instagram or anything like
We are on
that? Nice.
Instagram and we are on Facebook.
Okay.
And yeah, if you just search Ely Outfitting Company, you should bring it up on both of those as well. Sharing
Perfect.
photos, lots of good photos of the Boundary Waters.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Anything you want to leave people with in relation to the Boundary Waters or anything like that? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I guess the thing that comes to mind is just that important to keep in mind that these public lands and really special natural places need to be protected. And we look at them sometimes and think they look like they've always been there and that they're always going to be there and they're always going to be as pristine and clean as they've always been. But the reality is we have to fight to protect them. It's amazing how many threats there actually are related to protecting our wilderness areas and particularly the Boundary Waters. And so, you know, it's a special place. We want to keep it special, and we want to keep it one of the most special places in Minnesota and the country. So we should be fighting for protecting it.
Yeah. How can people support that? I mean, I know there's Save the Boundary Waters is out there.
Yeah. So the Save the Boundary Waters campaign is really the lead on the threat of sulfide ore copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters, and that's one of the threats we've been kind of fighting and addressing and educating people about for quite a while, and will probably continue to be something that we need to keep on top of for a long time. So we don't want water pollution of the Boundary Waters. Our waters are so clean that you can drink directly from the lake, which is one of those amazing things that you can't do many places safely.
Yeah, exactly.
And we do it here, and we want to keep it that way, and we want to keep this world-class freshwater fishery as top-notch as it is, and don't put that at risk either. So
all right,
yeah,
that sounds good.
So check them out.
Save the Boundary Waters. Save the Boundary Waters. All right, Jason, thank you for coming on.
Blake, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for
joy. Nice chatting with you. Yes. I'll look forward to seeing you back in Ely. We'll get you on the water.
Thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Even one word, it helps a ton. Sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Stay wild.
You've been listening to Untamed Unbroken, a Lone Pine Adventures original podcast.